Can you hear the delegation? Hold on. That's what I'm trying to figure out. I just put Patrick in and I see. See now, when I turn that on, I'm getting time. Big time feedback. Okay, so let me just.
Hello, good afternoon. Okay, great. So you can hear me then. Great. Okay. Should I begin? I can't hear your side, unfortunately. Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship and Council. I will share my screen for our project presentation. And please just nod in the chat that you're able to see this. Okay, I'll assume that you're able to see this. Yes, thank you. My name is Patrick Godfrey. I'm a project development manager at Northland Power, and I'm here today to present the Dobbin Energy Storage Project to your worship and council. On the agenda for this presentation today is a little bit of a focus on Northland and our history in Ontario and globally. Also touching on the Oneida Storage Project, which is a 250 megawatt BESS project that we are currently building in southwestern Ontario. And I think I can skip the IESO LT1 procurement, as the previous speaker may have touched on this, but please let me know in the chat if not. Okay. Okay, thank you. And I'll focus most of the time on the Dobbin project overview itself to get you back a few minutes here, and then next steps. On the company itself, so Northland Power is a leading global power producer based out of Toronto, Canada, with almost 40 years of experience developing, building, and operating power projects across the world. We're focused in multiple markets and technologies with about 16 gigawatts in development and over 3 gigawatts of operating capacity across various technologies. We have a large experienced team of developers based here in Ontario with significant depth of management experience across the team and several different technologies as well. We also come with a strong environmental and health and safety track record. We are majority owners and developers of the first in construction battery energy storage system project, as I mentioned earlier, in southwestern Ontario. We have 4 onshore wind farms, 13 ground mount solar sites, 4 rooftop solar sites, and 4 natural gas facilities in the country. Altogether, our focus is on building strong relationships with local communities and Indigenous peoples, and this is rooted in our values and policies as a company. quickly, this is a rendering of the project that is currently under construction. There are almost 280 Tesla Megapacks on site. We are currently trenching, working on drainage, pouring concrete foundations for Tesla Megapacks, and they will be delivered in April 2024. And the construction of this project should take just about 2 years, with an anticipated commercial operations date in 2025. Just a few additional pictures to get a sense of what construction could look like on site, with the pouring of the foundations that you see in the top left, and some of the earthworks that you'll see as you move across the photos. Just in the background there, you also see a large Hydro One transmission corridor. I will skip over this, but I will highlight the ISO bid deadline of December 12th, and that we are working diligently to prepare the project for submission into the ISO procurement by that date. And last night, I should mention as well, we did conduct a public consultation at the Lakefield Marshland Center, where we received adjacent property owners, some staff and councillors at the meeting as well, and tabled questions, potential concerns around the project relating to noise, impacts to adjacent property owners, overall process and timelines, a little bit about the technology, but also a little bit about Northland Power and our experience in Ontario and the team that we have here and locally to help deliver the project. I think I can skip over what is best. And I'm just checking the chat here. Understood. Thank you. So touching on just the project benefits to Selwyn Township, we do see this project as being aligned with Selwyn Township's climate action plan to support with energy efficiency and creating resiliency within the grid. We are aware of future plans to enhance and expand around the Dobbin substation and potentially further with additional transmission lines, but understand these are still in the planning phase. So this project will support with energy efficiency and resiliency within the grid around that location. Aligns with the energy conservation and demand management plan to become a leader in renewable energy and create a reliable source of energy within the grid. There will be long-term and short-term jobs created during construction and operations. These projects, once in operations, do not typically have full dedicated staff on site. However, we do have a operations facility within Kingston and a team around the province to support with the operation of these projects. Typically, you'll see 10 to 20 shared resources to manage the plant, operate the plant, respond to security or safety concerns, and work on potential maintenance spare parts and ensuring the site is maintained as a prudent operator would. Here you will see a layout of the project site, including the project footprint. We have identified approximately 40 acres of land that is suitable for the BESS project. The project itself is a 100 megawatt, 400 megawatt hour project, which is a 4-hour battery system. And that size of project typically would consume about 5 to 10 acres of land within the yellow dashed area that you'll see here. This project will connect to the Honey Line C27P, which runs east-west, just south of the property here, where the property line does abut. The project is going to be set back from the roadway. It will be set back from adjacent property owners as well to limit the visual impacts and noise impacts from the project site. We have done extensive work on the environmental constraint side in discussions with the Conservation Authority and ensuring that we understand what setbacks and constraints there are around the property. We're in discussions with them on a continuing basis to understand what would be needed going forward from an environmental impact assessment perspective. We are also working closely with our construction contractors who have been to site to assess the constructability and design of this project. We're currently on site drilling boreholes to assess the geotechnical water quality features on site. And we're conducting this work to support with our bid come December 12th. I'm just checking the chat again. Great, thank you. We have done extensive noise modeling at this site, and we're leveraging lessons learned from the Oneida project, where we have a good understanding of the potential noise emissions for these projects and how to design to optimize to ensure that noise is being mitigated within the project footprint itself. So this continues as well, and with the setbacks that we are considering here, we are looking at complying with the provincial thresholds for the noise regulation as it relates to this project. So having the setbacks that we do here is beneficial for this siting. Our project timeline, we are looking to stay on track with the ISO timelines that they've indicated for achieving commercial operations by May 2028. This is within reach, subject to the ISO contract award being at around the Q1, Q2 2024 projected timelines. So following on this slide, you'll just notice that we're touching on the safety FAQs around fire safety. We do know this has been a question and concern for many local municipalities, townships. Again, with the Oneida project, we are working closely with the fire department and local stakeholders there to develop the emergency response and fire management plans, significant training that has been done between supplier of these mega packs at that site and the local fire department to ensure that we're prepared. And we would look to leverage those plans and the learnings in future projects, including this project as well. If I can, I'll just touch on, and may have heard this before as well. There have been instances of fire with projects in the past. Just checking chat, thank you. However, with the top tier suppliers that we're looking at today for these projects, the design around prevention as well as managing fires if they do occur are self-contained. So you may have heard this, that the battery packs that are within the modules are self-contained to a fire within that module. And then if it were to spread, it's further self-contained by the storage container itself. And then there are also other preventative measures to ensure that those fires, if they get to that point, do not spread to adjacent containers. So we work closely with suppliers and as an operator with the local fire departments to ensure that those plans are in place. Overall next steps for the project, we're targeting the bid deadline of December 12th for this project and continue to work on our class environmental assessment for minor transmission facilities. We continue to work on our preliminary design, taking into consideration the feedback from all of the constraints analysis, the planning approvals, and engineering that we're doing on the project. This meeting is to present to council and your worship for the request for a municipal support resolution at a follow-on council meeting that we're aware may be tabled later in the month. I will pause and see if there are any questions in chat. Okay. Okay, at a later date? Not a problem at all. It's quite tricky to do. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship and Council, for your time. Have a good afternoon.
family businesses to ensure that non-eligible items are not put into the blue box, so that therefore, I'm not thinking about just the 5K, but also the efficiency of the system. So will there be an education process put in place for residents and businesses, and is that our responsibility if there is going to be one?
Yeah, so for sure there will be education, promotion education programs. CMO will be developing a lot of materials. We will be able to use those materials. We can also develop materials of our own. We traditionally work with the county in terms of promotion and education, so we will continue to do that, to try and make it as seamless a transition as possible.
Right.
I think the big thing from the outset will be people understanding who they need to call if they have an issue. Because it's not the township, it's not the county, it will be CMO who will be managing, or their contract manager will be managing the process.
Excellent, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Black.
Thank you, through Mayor. Thanks for the report, Janice. Excellent information. Got a couple of questions. So we're going to be paid $60,000 a year basically to accept recyclables at the our landfill site as it exists today. They won't be bringing additional recyclables there on their own. It's just people that stop in and drop recyclables. Is that correct?
Yes, so it will be for our residents, and for the transition period, we are allowed to allow the non-eligible sources to deposit the materials as well.
So it doesn't preclude other people from other townships coming and using that recycling depot?
It does not. Our ECA does allow for recycling to be deposited there from anybody in the county.
Okay.
So that won't change. That's current now, and that won't change.
Okay, follow up, Your Worship. One of my big concerns is the non-eligible recyclables that their plan calls for a 4% contamination rate. Well, I think the current contamination rate is in the teens.
It's 10%.
10, is
Yeah.
it 10?
Yeah.
So that's a considerable amount of contamination, and they're going to deduct from our income the cost of removing those contaminations, from what I understand.
No, so you're absolutely right, 4% is much less than our current 10. From the information I have, we don't have issues maintaining that 10% level. The deduction isn't for contamination materials, though. What the deduction is for the volume of materials that have come into the site from the non-eligible sources, so your IC and I sectors. So that's not dealing with the contamination, it's just dealing with the sector that it's coming from, because the pros are not responsible for paying for the service for those sectors.
Right. I thought it was both. I thought we were going to be charged back for both of those things.
Not in accordance with the agreement. So the way they deal with the contamination percentage in the agreement, it is a 4% limit. That's standard across the board. There was absolutely no movement on what that number was going to be. Certainly they did explain in terms of how they would actually implement that they'd really be looking for something that was a significant concern in order to address that with a municipality. And then indeed they would be providing some information, they would be auditing, so that they would verify their concern, and then they would work with the municipality to try and come up with ways to improve that contamination level.
So there's no financial penalty at this point for contamination?
Not at this point.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
All right, are there any other questions? Councillor Cools.
Thank you, through you. Thanks for the report, Janice. And just to let everyone know, I came and sat with Janice yesterday because I couldn't wrap my head around this report. There's so many different working pieces. So my colleagues have pointed out a number of questions that I had asked her, but I want to follow up on two. So the educational component, doing the math, $1 times 8,888 households, which I thought was a made-up number, but is an impact number, comes out to $740.60 per month when divided by 12. Is that enough for the educational costs moving forward?
Yeah, I do think it will be. I think it is additional money. We do education and promotion now. So now we're actually going to get some money to support what we're doing now, but it may also give us, a little bit of money to do some extra promotion and education, whether that's, a flyer that goes out with the council communicator, whether it's radio, as Andrew said. Yeah, so we will put that money to good use to try and make sure that the program I think to help with the transition, and to make sure that people understand really, what's recyclable and what's not.
Thank you. And just a follow-up to that question is that I recognize Article 4 of the contract, like I went into the deep roots of this to figure it out. They said that we as the contractor can use the educational material from CMO. Have you looked at that yet, or is that available?
I haven't seen it yet, but I assume once we sign the contract, we would get that information.
It seems like a leg up, but I don't know if it's going to be, so just asking.
Yeah, we won't really know until we see it, but we do have some pretty good talent within our staff who can put together some pretty creative educational tools. So I am confident that we will be able to use that money quite well.
And then my final question there was, we talked about this, but can you just clarify that there's no change to tipping fees for the residents?
No, there's no tipping fees for recycling now, and there will be no tipping fees for recycling under this program. Just, we do need to keep in mind that at the end of the transition period, all bets are off for the non-eligible sources, so for the IC&I sector, so that will be something that has to be dealt with.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Just to mention that, as Janice mentioned, there are cities and townships that have already started July the 1st, and it's been seamless. So I'm hoping from that experience that ours will be the same. One of the things that they are doing is that it's universal as to what is recyclable, where before different municipalities or cities had different things you could recycle. People who came up here to the cottage, they could recycle certain things in the city, but they couldn't do it here. Now everything is going to be the same, so it's going to, I think, cut down on contamination because everybody will know what the rules are. So I'm hoping that everything will go smoothly, and I'm looking for someone to move the recommendations that's before us. Councillor Henry, Councillor Koulis, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. We will now move on to Adam, the pedestrian infrastructure considerations.
I'll actually take the lead on just delivering the report.
All right, Angela.
Yeah, Adam and I did work on the report together, and certainly Janice and Lane collaborated on it as well, so I just wanted to make that clear. But I'll just try to go through this as briefly as I can. I know there's quite a bit of information here, so hopefully it was helpful. So as was noted earlier, Council did pass a motion earlier looking for some information around the considerations around how we consider developing sidewalks within our municipality, and then more specifically what some of the decision-making points were around essentially not including the sidewalk on Water Street between King and Reed. So this report kind of attempts to combine all of that information. We just thought it was important maybe to provide a little bit of background information about the different types of pedestrian infrastructure, because there are different nuances, and each type is a little bit different in terms of how you design it and how you're required to maintain it in accordance with provincial regulations. So essentially we kind of have three general types of pedestrian infrastructure: multi-use paths, recreational trails, and then sidewalks. So multi-use paths and sidewalks are typically located within a road allowance, and in most cases they're installed in our urban and our semi-urban areas. In terms of sidewalks, we are required under the Municipal Act to maintain those, to maintain those in accordance with the minimum maintenance standard. So there is an extra level of care that we are required to undertake whenever we have a sidewalk in our municipality under the municipal maintenance standard. So we just have to have regard for that. In our case, we've got about 16 in our community, and I think I'm safe in saying that all of our sidewalk is concrete. Typically, you would construct a sidewalk in concrete, but it can actually be developed for pavement, but our practice is not to do that. I did want to note that we do have areas in our township where there's an asphalt boulevard. Oftentimes,
pedestrians use it, but that's not a sidewalk because, you know, you can park there and it's not just for pedestrians. A sidewalk is truly the creme de la creme for the pedestrian because it provides right-of-way access to pedestrians. Multi-use paths can be used in some different circumstances, and they offer an opportunity for kind of a mixed use. So you could have cycling and pedestrian use on a multi-use path. We decided with the Causeway project that we actually use a multi-use path on the majority of the section of the Causeway, essentially from the Bell Rotary Park up to the base of the bridge. Of course, we've got a lot of trails in our township. Some of them are on our own land, some of them are on conservation lands, and some of them are even on private lands. So generally, they're located kind of internally on a piece of property. So the township does not have an established sidewalk policy. However, that doesn't mean that the lack of a policy doesn't mean we don't consider pedestrian uses whenever we do a project. So in terms of how we kind of consider our sidewalks, we sort of have two different scenarios. When we have a planned subdivision, that's the best opportunity for us to plan our infrastructure because essentially we're starting from scratch. Our typical process for a subdivision in an urban area is to require at least one sidewalk on a collector, arterial, or local road. So we consistently use this practice, and we have a typical road profile that includes the sidewalk that is provided to the developer and incorporated into the planned subdivision. In a rural area, we will consider whether it makes sense to have a sidewalk. Sometimes if there is no connecting point, we may not actually move forward with putting in a sidewalk because we may have an issue maintaining it. We are working right now with the County of Peterborough. Their engineering department is going to help us update our standard road profile. It does need a bit of a refresh, so I know Adam's working with the County of Peterborough on that. Once that profile is updated, again, any plans to subdivision will incorporate that profile as appropriate. So then we have, when we're considering sidewalks in our developed areas, this is where it gets very nuanced because we often have a lot of other things that we need to think about. We have different road widths depending on where the road is located. We have considerations around, you know, the traffic volume, the pedestrian volume, collision data. Are there street lights in the area, especially in an urban area? If you're going to put a sidewalk there, you want to make sure you have appropriate lighting. Are there different generators that are causing pedestrians to have to go there, like in your downtown shopping area, or to go to a school and go to a hospital or something like that? We have to think about how we're able to maintain it in accordance with minimum maintenance standards. Encroachments are a huge issue in a developed area. We've got trees, we've got hydro poles, we've got basically private property owners that sometimes put gardens in and things like that in our wheelhouse. We always do our best when we're doing a major road project to have good public engagement. So we want to get feedback from everybody on not just sidewalks, but the whole development of a new project. So all that considered, we really like to have that flexibility around how we consider sidewalks in our developed areas. We will, as part of this recommendation, we're suggesting that we can improve the documentation related to how we consider those things. When we get into the Water Street project, we did do a lot of public engagement around that. We did summarize those comments from the public and send that back out to people who participated in that process so that they would understand the decision making around kind of why the design occurred the way it did. So that's kind of the how we sort of think in a bigger perspective around when and where we put sidewalks in and in what circumstance. With respect to Water Street, we definitely, as noted, did have a really good look at how we could incorporate a sidewalk on the east side of Water Street between King and Reed. We were able to accommodate a brand new sidewalk between King and up around the corner by the condominiums in front of the community center, so we were able to accommodate a sidewalk there. There are, in the report, we've noted the major areas of concern and why we did not add a sidewalk to that area along the east side of Water Street. So the cemetery, as was mentioned before, was a huge concern. I know that I spoke with the chair of the community museum on a number of occasions. She was very concerned that any kind of construction would potentially disrupt the pioneer burials. We do have records for the cemetery. However, you know, we know that those records are old, and we were confident that there would be the potential for potential burials within the roadlands. So we really planned the construction to minimize moving into that area as much as possible. We also considered the impacts to the Hendren Funeral Home. The funeral home has used a portion of the road allowance for many years. They don't restrict the use of that area. Certainly anybody is allowed to park there or walk there, but it has been used to provide and support parking for their operation. So if a sidewalk were to have been located there, it would have eliminated 9 to 11 parking spaces at that location. We also looked at adding some lay-by parking beside St. Paul's Church. Because the previous road profile didn't have any curb and gutter, essentially the shoulders were used for parking, and parking occurred everywhere. So in order for us to try to manage the parking in a better way, we tried to identify specific areas where parking should take place. So we did accommodate that beside St. Paul's Church, and there is not enough room, again, in that area to have parking and a sidewalk in that location. There were 2 hydro poles that are within that section that would have had to have been relocated. Hydro poles can be moved. There's definitely a cost to do that. But the guy wires that actually are required to support those poles, if they were moved back as far back into the road allowance as you could, it would have meant that the guy wires would have had to be located on private property, and we would have to get easements from those property owners. So that was considered as well. We had grading issues at 2 driveway locations a little bit closer to the King Street side of things. Essentially, because those properties, those homes are built fairly close to the road, and there's a significant grade there. In order for us to, if this was the sidewalk, essentially because of the grade, we would have had a fairly exaggerated crossfall, which doesn't meet accessibility requirements. It would have been a real issue trying to manage a level sidewalk as well as providing an access to the driveway and the garage without kind of having a very steep incline. We had a mature white pine that was right smack dab in the middle of where you want to put the sidewalk in. The Draco actually took care of that for us, but of course that was after the fact. So all of those things were definitely considered as part of the project, and that's why a sidewalk was not added to that location.
We have a recommendation in front of us.
Sorry, Mayor.
And I don't know if there are any questions or comments. Councilor Cool.
Yeah, can you clarify with this archaeological assessment, when it was done, and it says 1 to 2 points, and I thought archaeological did set up 4 points.
Yeah, so they can go up to a stage 4. So archaeological assessments are, so a stage 1, 2 archaeological assessment essentially is a sort of a desktop evaluation. So they take a look at the property, they take a look at the other potential archaeological findings that might be found at that location, and then they identify through that study, is there a potential here for archaeological findings? So in our case, we had a cemetery, so very high that there would be findings. So as part of a stage 2 study, you would do some excavation, some test pits essentially. So you would dig up certain grid pattern and kind of look and see if there's any findings there. That's just more for archaeological or artifacts. But whenever there's a cemetery, there's a heightened responsibility and there's an additional responsibility for that. So in this case, we actually, when we did the construction, we had to have an archaeologist on site for the entire time that the excavation was taking place in the construction area to clear it, make sure that there was nothing that was found. So in the case of the museum property or the cemetery property, we had to do that where the curb kind of ended and into the road, but we did not do any test pits between the curb and the property line of the cemetery. Again, we did not do that because we didn't want to disturb it at all. So we didn't have any construction plan there. We just made the decision that's a no-go zone, so we're not going to do that.
So what were the actual findings, just you made the decision not to go further?
Oh, so sorry, the findings in the that's okay, no worries, yeah. So they did find a few artifacts, but nothing, certainly they didn't find any remains, and they didn't find any significant artifacts that would maybe move on to a stage 3 or stage 4. So a stage 3 or stage 4 is when you actually find something significant, and you sort of stop the whole project and have a good look at what's in there. If you find remains, that means that you're essentially bringing the coroner in. The coroner investigates to see, well, where did these remains come from, and so on. So we also, a big component of this was we had a road construction project that was impacting businesses, residents. The last thing we wanted to do was disturb an area that we didn't want to disturb, and we were asked not to disturb, and potentially have an open, if we did that, God forbid we found anything, that whole project would have been stalled. And, that was already 2 years of a lot of construction anguish. So imagine how it would be if we just had to have an open construction project that was sitting there open and we couldn't do anything on for who knows how long.
So I just have a question then about the funeral home because it's adjacent to it. Were those properties that were connected at one time?
Yes, they were. Yeah.
So when I took a walk yesterday, they had disturbed on the township property because they paved it.
Yeah.
So that not.
Yeah. So we hired another archaeologist for that work.
Okay.
We went through a stage 1-2 assessment. We have a study on file with that, and we actually didn't do a lot of excavation on the Hendrons or on the road allowance between the curb and Hendrons property. We actually built up the road, but even though we weren't excavating, construction is still construction. We had to have an archaeologist on site for the entire time that we were doing that work. So they were there, they monitored everything to make sure that there were no findings. So we did all of that in accordance with the requirements of the archaeologist.
And then my final question here with the funeral home is, because their parking is on township property, do we have a contract or anything with them, just for future reliability or anything?
We don't have a contract. We're actually currently working with the funeral home on an encroachment agreement. So there are some encroachments on the township road line. So we are working with Hendrons on those things right now.
Did those come into the discussion of the sidewalk at all?
The encroachments?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm going to move on to Deputy Mayor Black, but I have a question from Mary's questions. The stages that were done for the archaeological, they would have to go further in towards the property and be done again to include a sidewalk?
That's right. So the area where, so if council wanted to put a sidewalk where the cemetery is located, then we would have to do essentially start the archaeological work again.
And possibly have findings because it's closer to the burial site.
That's right.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Black.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So Scott's question about why this came back up was
partially because, you know, and I'm not here to question any of the previous decisions on the site plan and all the discussion of public, review of that, but it became apparent that by curbing the road, we've actually narrowed the road surface, the operating surface, which had gravel side ditches and stuff like that, which was plowed wider. So even though the road surface hasn't technically narrowed by curbing it, some of those areas that in the past would have been wider are now narrowed, and the road surface is the only thing that's there. So I think it became apparent after the fact, and everything's 2020 hindsight. It was clear that we lost some parking. So the Hendon Parking Act is actually a positive result of formally making that parking. But we also lost a lot of walkability of that street. And again, I don't think anything was done on purpose. All the reasons why the sidewalk on the east side was challenging. Some of it does make sense. And it would be very costly to do that. So I just really wanted to bring that point forward, that it's like a lot of things. It's like when you're renovating an old house, you start opening walls, you find things that aren't going to work, and through this whole process, I think that's what's happened here. Trying to renovate an old street to the current standard is challenging, but I would also hope that, again, through the standard road profile that's being worked at with the county, that surfaces are implemented in any future developments, because the walkability is an important feature of the township. Walkability, bicycling, all of those sorts of things. 25 years ago wouldn't have been a consideration in a rural subdivision. They allow an 18-inch curb, shoulder, and I have probably 15 years of experience on the police board, and almost all the complaints come around the inability of people to be able to walk on the road, which is what people want to do today. So society's changed, and I think we have to move our standards to make sure that we have, in all circumstances, opportunities for people to walk. No use asking people in this day and age to drive to a trail. Kind of counterintuitive to what we're trying to achieve with the environment. So I would hope that, again, any urban subdivision has sidewalks, proper sidewalks, but even more rural developments have some kind of multi-use path incorporated into the design. So those places people can go for a walk in their own neighborhood. So really, that's the only thing I have to say. More of a comment than
I want to thank Angie and Adam and all your others as well for this report. It's very well put together, and thank you again for walking with me to help me to understand it better. As Mary said, to read it is one thing, but to walk it and have it explained. So I wanted to thank you for that. As Deputy Mayor Black said, I respect the process that was undertaken in planning the Queen Street restoration and all of those that were involved. I respect the Queen Street residences and businesses who have maintained and made property improvements on the township land, the road allowance. Perhaps it would be best at this point if we take a look at that report in two sections. I'm not going to talk about the sidewalk policy right now. I'm only going to address what we've been talking about, and that is the Queen Street sidewalk and perhaps
I believe you mean Water Street.
What did I say, Queen Street?
Yep, you did.
I didn't mean Queen Street, Water Street. And I want to propose an amendment to the motion, if the motion is to accept the report for information, if I could. So I've understood with the walk and everything else and everything that we've been through with all of this. I fully understand the challenges, the 6, now it's really 5 because the tree is gone, the 5 challenges that have resulted in that decision being made. But I am convinced that the challenges are surmountable. I believe that among our priorities as a council is the health and safety of those who live in Selwyn.
and those who visit us here. And it's been proven, and Deputy Mayor Black hinted at this, it's been proven that people's mental and physical health is improved when they get out and walk. And one of the most popular places to get out and walk in Lakefield is among our most beautiful spots, and that's along Water Street, adjacent to the river. Therefore, I believe that we have both a moral and a fiduciary responsibility to do all we can to make walking on Water Street as safe as we can. Consider for a moment, just for a moment, if someone is injured or killed while they're walking on Water Street on that portion without a sidewalk. Consider if someone's struck by a vehicle when they're crossing the street in the summer in order to walk safely on the trail because the sidewalk ended. Or consider if someone is struck by a vehicle in the winter because the trail isn't maintained. And so therefore we are essentially forcing them to walk on the street because the sidewalk ended. Imagine what we would say to the family, or imagine what we would say in court if we said we could have built a sidewalk there, but we decided not to. Now, on September 30th, we received a letter from Isabel Tai, a long-term resident of Water Street. She reminded us that having no sidewalk on that portion of Water Street is a safety hazard, and she encouraged us to complete the sidewalk. In our package today, in the section that we'll be looking at later with correspondence, Norrin Solmanis wrote to remind us of our responsibility to ensure that we grow a healthy and safety community within an active transportation system. And he wrote that not completing the sidewalk between Reed and King Streets, and I'll quote, creates a dysfunctional, an unsafe, and uninviting network for the pedestrian community. Another letter that we received and is in our package today is from former Selwyn Township Mayor Mary Smith. She wrote us to say that she hopes that we budget to complete the sidewalk on Water Street. She reminds us that Selwyn is part of the county's active transportation master plan that promotes the county as a healthy, prosperous, and sustainable community. And a component of that plan involves creating a safe, accessible, and integrated transportation system. Former Mayor Smith also wonders, and this is something that Councillor Koulis may help us with, former Mayor Smith wonders if the Accessibility Committee was asked their opinion regarding having no sidewalk between Reed and King Streets. So all three letters, my deep consideration of this issue that goes with the respect that I outlined earlier, I believe brings us to a fundamental question. That is, should we design our infrastructure, not only in Lakefield, but in Selwyn, should we design our infrastructure not just for cars, but also for people? So with all that said, I would like to move an amendment to the staff report, proposed motion that we accept it for information. So I would like the amendment to say that council accepts the portion of the staff report with regard to the Water Street sidewalk for information. But further, whereas one of the strategies to meet the township's climate goals is to build an active transportation network and support active transportation, that included a commitment to develop consistent sidewalk requirements and guidelines. And whereas one of the values that anchors Selwyn's strategic plan states that we should foster a healthy, engaged, connected community, and whereas according to the City of Toronto sidewalk programs, policies, and bylaws, sidewalks help remove barriers to access for vulnerable populations, including children, seniors, and persons with disabilities. And whereas council should strive to do all it can to enhance the health and safety of our residents, that must include pedestrian safety. So therefore, council asks staff to engage the appropriate professionals to provide a plan and estimated cost to complete the sidewalk on Water Street between Reed and King Streets. And that is the amendment to the motion.
I would ask if that was very lengthy and you've read it to us. We haven't had a chance to digest it, John. I would ask if at the beginning of your motion, you talked about receiving the information. I'm looking at the recommendation we had in our package.
The recommendation in the package, I
Yes.
believe, was to receive the report.
So I would ask that it be separated, that we receive the report and then we can then deal with your motion. Are you okay with that?
As long as the motion comes to the floor, I'm fine with that process to bring it to the floor.
All right, so what we're dealing with right now is that the report related to pedestrian infrastructure, which outlines the considerations that resulted in sidewalk not being added on Water Street between King and Reed, as well as how the township's standard road profiles in urban and rural areas incorporate pedestrian infrastructure within plans of subdivision, brackets, new development, be received for information. So can we vote on that part? And then it actually goes on to, in relation to new expanded pedestrian infrastructure within a developed area, staff improve the documentation related to pedestrian traffic review component for projects using a checklist based on the considerations identified in the report and summarizing the results of the review to ensure all aspects related to pedestrian infrastructure were reviewed and considered. Can we take the recommendation that we received in our package and vote on it, and then we'll deal with your motion? Can we do that?
That would be fine, Mayor Senes, but I also have an alteration that I would like to propose to what the staff report section that deals with the sidewalk policy. Because as I said at the beginning of my remarks, there are really two reports. One is about the sidewalk policy. I would love to deal with that as a separate issue.
All
And the
right.
second is the sidewalk between King and Reed
All
on
right,
water.
so I'm trying to move this.
And I'm fine to move it and to accept it as long as we can loop back and I can make a motion with respect to both parts of it.
Okay.
Two motions.
So what I'm looking at is the first part of the recommendation that dealt with the Water Street report, receiving it for information. So can we vote on that now? And then we'll go to your motion to do with the Water Street. Okay. All right. Questions? Well, we're in the middle right now of dealing with a motion to receive the report. So it's not real, it probably wouldn't be affected by your questions, right? It kind of got cut off for I see. Yeah.
Yeah, and if I could, Mayor Sen, yeah, as long as we're going to accept it, accept the report, fine. Let's accept the
All we're
report for
doing is
information.
Receiving the report, and then you can ask your questions, okay?
And then we'll deal with both parts of the motion and your question
Yeah.
comes up. Yeah.
All right. Or is it questions to do with the motion? Okay, so that's a bit unrelated, but so what I'd like to do is first deal with the portion of the recommendation that receives the report with regards to the sidewalk that's on Water Street between King and Reed, just receiving. Okay, so I'm going to move it. Councillor Henry, Deputy Mayor Black, all in favor, that's carried. Okay. Your question had to do with?
It did have to do with Water Street. So my question was those houses that were built beside the funeral home that we just noted were so close to the roadway. Did they come in front of Committee of Adjustment? Because that wasn't in the report. Because they're seriously close to even the hydro pole and onto the township.
Yeah,
property.
so one of the properties for sure did come before Committee of Adjustment, would have been certainly not this council, and I'm not sure it was in the last term, it
Mhm.
might have been in the previous term. And I'm sorry,
No, it did.
they both did? Okay, thank you.
Was there 3 houses or 2 houses? Like I have to go back and walk because I'm not familiar with it.
3 now.
Yeah.
All 3 had to come to Committee of Adjustment. Yeah.
Okay, just
Yeah.
because that wasn't in the report, but it seemed influential to this conversation. So,
Yeah.
and then my second question is with the causeway and the new walking path there, it looks like a multi-use path. Will it be plowed during the winter, given that sidewalks will be plowed in Bridge North with that fun little machine?
No, we weren't planning to maintain the multi-use path in the winter
Okay.
along the causeway.
Okay, that's the questions. All right. John, back to you with your motion to do with.
Would you like me to read all the whereases again, or would you like to just the motion? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Where were we? Okay. Whereas one of the strategies to meet the township's climate goals is to build an active transportation network and support active transportation that includes a commitment to develop consistent sidewalk requirements and guidelines. Whereas one of the values that anchors Selwyn's strategic plan states that we should foster a healthy, engaged, and connected community. Whereas according to the City of Toronto sidewalk programs, policies, and bylaws, sidewalks help remove barriers to access for vulnerable populations, including children, seniors, and persons with disabilities. Whereas council should strive to do all it can to enhance the health and safety of our residents, and that must include pedestrian safety. Therefore, council asks staff to engage the appropriate professionals to provide a plan and estimated cost to complete the sidewalk on Water Street between Reed and King Streets. So I'll just do the therefore one more time. Council asks staff to engage the appropriate professionals to provide a plan and estimated cost to complete the sidewalk on Water Street between Reed and King Streets.
Thank you.
My assumption is that the professionals engaged, the engineers may come back and say it is cost prohibitive to move the poles, to do the thing. So that they may come back and say that one driveway or the two driveways, you just can't do it. Or you might have to bring the sidewalk to the driveway and the sidewalk to the driveway because you can't. There, who knows? But at least let them ask the questions. Let us say, provide us a plan for how it will be done. Don't tell us why it can't be done. Provide a plan for what would have to be done in order to get it done and a cost. So that's my motion.
Thank you. All right, well, we need someone to second it to get it on the floor if we're going to talk about it. All right, Councillor Koulis is seconding it. Now, we need some debate, please. Councillor Henry.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Senes. It's been a lengthy process for this, and it's been an expensive process, and we're almost at the end of the process. We do have a handful of our community members bringing issues forward regarding the sidewalk or the lack thereof. I guess it's something that could be put on the table, but I don't think it should be happening for a while yet. I can't wait till this project's over and we could talk maybe about Ennismore or Bridge North or Young's Point sidewalks, which randomly come to an end all over the place as well. And we have kids walking through ditches on their way to school in Ennismore. So yeah, we're almost at the end of this project, and I get so many compliments on the staff, Accurix, Adam's work with his crew getting this project done. People are so happy with it. We had money that was budgeted for it. We had money that we received through a grant. There was a plan, and you followed through on it. And here we are picking it apart on you on behalf of a couple of people, which as council we're supposed to do, but there's got to be something else on this agenda we can talk about today. Thank you.
Councillor Koulis.
My biggest concern is that this seems to keep coming up. So even if like I'm not here in 4 or 10 years, whatever, I think we need to think about this now. So at least we have the paperwork and the work done so that you don't have to rehab this conversation in 10 to 20 years after Lakefield South is built and you have a higher population coming forward. That being said, I think you can also think long-term about budgeting this. If this report comes back and it's doable in 10 to 15 years, why not start putting stuff aside for 10 to 15 years from now when you might have a higher tax base too with Lakefield South. So like, I'm not thinking right now, because there's a lot of work that's been done. It's great, but I'm just worried it's going to keep coming back on us. So I'll leave it there for that.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Black.
Thank you through Mayor Sennis. I agree with some of the comments that have already been made. The residents and businesses have endured 2 years of disruption. Some cases, loss of access, loss of business. So this isn't, anything that gets proposed here would have to be budgeted for long term. It would be a lot of money. The 5 issues that Councillor Boyko and I looked at yesterday with staff, and thanks for that opportunity, are significant costs. Should we have a plan in place for down the road? I believe so. I think at a minimum, we need to look at all the options along Water Street. The trail, it looks as though it needs some work, and maybe the opportunity is not a sidewalk on the east side, but an upgrade to the trail that could be maintained through the winter as well as the rest of the year. So I think if we have anybody look at the situation, I'd look to have them look at all options, because a sidewalk on the west side looks a lot more doable than on the east side. There are a few great issues on the west side of the road, but not as many issues as hydro poles and driveway grades that we have on the east side. So I think if council wishes to have a plan or look at the situation, I think all options should be on the table as far as potentially redesignating the trail at certain points as a walkway, as a sidewalk. I know they're not always made of cement. We have a policy we like cement, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's a paved surface that takes them across the street, up the trail, and then back onto the sidewalk at the other end. Might be another option.
Councillor Boyko.
Thank you. If I could just make comments on the comments that have been made. First, with respect to Councillor Henry, I don't think council should do anything if 2 or 3 people ask us to. This has nothing to do with 2 or 3 people asking us to do this. I quoted those letters because there are points that were important that needed to be made, rather than accepting their letters later on after this discussion had taken place. So I was just allowing them voice. We shouldn't make any decision based on 2 or 3 people, but we should make decisions based on what is right. So that is what I'm bringing forward. The other 2 comments I think are together in that what the motion is asking for is appropriate professionals to provide a plan. That plan could involve what Deputy Mayor Black was talking about. That plan could say, yes, we should do this. It will cost this much, but maybe we can't do it for 2 or 3 or 5 years. But at least we have a plan in place, and we can tell the people who are complaining, and there will be more once people begin to walk there again. They haven't been walking there because it's been under construction for 2 years. But once people begin walking there again, there will be more people, and we can say at least to them and to our conscience that we have a plan in place. And so this is not to say, let's dig it up next year. No way. We won't have the plan in place. We won't have the money in place. This is to say, let's put a plan in place for when the money is there. Thank you.
Thank you through you, Mayor. Just another comment. So again, from a cost perspective, that worries me a little bit about cost of getting this kind of opinion. So I would expect that this would be more of a planning opinion on what could be done, as opposed to somebody coming up with drawings, which would be very expensive. All those sorts of things. More of an overview of what the options might be, and then council can maybe decide, okay, let's get a little more detail on a certain aspect of what the recommendation might be. But I see this more of a tabletop type of exercise to look at what options might be there to provide a service. Because these things can go anywhere as far as cost. They can be $100,000 or they could be a $5,000 cost. So I want to make sure that it's some kind of a report that says here are some of the options that we could consider without getting into a lot of cost in drawings and sort of thing.
If I could, Mayor Sennis, that is what I'm talking about with the plan. For example, a telephone pole would have to be moved. How much does that cost?
2 of them.
Yeah, 2 of them. We don't know. Can we put the sidewalk around the pole as has been done on Reed Street? Don't know. Maybe we can, maybe we can't. let us tell us the plan. How much will the archaeological study be? Because we've had an archaeological study up to the curb. We have not had an archaeological study on the portion where, how much would that cost? So tell us, provide us a plan that says, if you want to build a sidewalk here, here's everything that you need to do. Here's where it can go. Here's where it can't go. So therefore, here's about how much it will cost. And all we're doing is saying, give us more detail. Give us a
All
plan.
right, so I am going to weigh in here. We have many trails and
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I just want to just note a couple of things. So I think the report does, I think it's not that a sidewalk couldn't go there. I think we've outlined in the report the reasons, the impediments around it. So if council moves forward this way, for the sidewalk to go there, that means that there would be no parking in that area at Hendrance. So is council prepared to decide that that's would be taken away? Is council prepared to eliminate the parking beside St. Paul's Church? Because that's where the sidewalk would go. Is council prepared to, open up that area beside the cemetery and potentially find burials? So I think what you want, we can tell you right now that the sidewalk could go there. There's costs around all of that, and there's considerations around all of that. So if we're going to spend time and resources on things that we already kind of know, is council prepared at the end of the day, when that report or plan or whatever that is comes back, to implement it, knowing that those are the things that will have to come off the table to create a continuous sidewalk there?
yeah, so
Sorry.
excuse me, I would like to say something as the chair. I think you've had the floor a few times, Councillor Boyko. I feel that we do have a lot of trails and we do have a lot of walkability in the village and in the township now. And I am going to expand on what Angie has said, that if we go forward with this plan, what we are possibly looking at is desecrating one or more final resting places, losing a local business 9 to 11 parking spaces, reducing parking at a church, both where parking is already at a premium because we have so little of it in the village. We would have to move 2 hydro poles, adversely affect homeowners, some who will have to regrade, all at a great expense to the taxpayers, for a stretch of sidewalk that is going to no known destination. We've been given concrete, no pun intended, reasons why the sidewalk wasn't extended, and nothing has changed. Common sense should prevail. Is the motion just to satisfy that the right decision was made in the first place? As a council, we don't know yet what budget figures we're looking at for next year, but we know we have rampant inflation and costs are up. I don't want to spend another dime on this, and I will ask for a recorded vote so the taxpayers are going to be able to see who voted to increase the taxes for this issue, which should be put to bed. Thank you. Now, Councillor Boyko.
I will state only one thing that I've stated already. I am happy that it's a recorded vote, because if someone loses their life because they were forced to walk on Queen Street because there was no sidewalk, I will on Water Street. Sorry, I want to keep on saying Queen Street. If someone loses their life because they were forced to walk on the street because there was no sidewalk, then I will be happy to have my vote recorded that I think there should have been a sidewalk.
Fear mongering, Councillor Boyko. There's one more. Ron.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I don't know that looking at the east side of the street is going to be an option with the number of issues that are there. The cost of the studies alone to look at that side of the street would probably be more than the cost of upgrading the trail to a sidewalk or a multi-use path that could be cleaned in the winter time. So I don't necessarily support that side of it. I support, Councillor Boyko's, as I said, also, the walkability needs to be a factor there. I would rather spend, some consulting money on looking at the possibilities of doing something on the west side, either the trail or a sidewalk on that side, because I just think the amount of, grief, we're gonna cause on the east side and the cost of consultants, archaeological, it's gonna be very expensive, and that money could be better spent on building something or paving the path or creating something on the other side of the road. So I can't support the motion if it's just looking at the east side. The west side and other options I can see as an option down the road. It would have to be budgeted for, it would be years down the road, but we could have a plan.
Councillor Poulos.
Thank you through you. I just have a couple clarification questions that we skipped over earlier. So number one, was there an accessibility review that occurred with this?
Yes, our accessibility committee reviewed the entire design.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So that excluded then the sidewalk because
Correct.
it wasn't
Correct.
included.
That's
Okay.
right. Yeah.
So that would have to occur under proposed research. If it came forward,
If a
right?
new design came forward, the accessibility committee would provide comment on it. Yes.
Okay. So right now, when I was walking the street yesterday, and maybe I overlooked it, but I didn't see any signage because where the sidewalk does end, like if I'm pushing my stroller and it's winter and I'm like, oh crap, like where do I go now? Is there anything we can do in the short term for liability? Like to put up a sign saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did. That did come up yesterday. We could definitely install signage that where the sidewalk ends to just say the sidewalk ends there. So there are alternatives. Like somebody isn't forced to go out onto the road. They could make a decision to continue on the sidewalk going the other way. So yeah, we could definitely put signage at the end at Reed and King to say that the sidewalk is closed there. The other thing I just wanted to mention, in that section on the west side of Water Street, I'm not sure that there's enough room to put a sidewalk in there without removing trees. So again, we could probably take a look at that and determine how much room there is there now. It's pretty narrow in that location. So before we did a lot of work based on how council decides to move forward, that might be, we might want to just look at that first to see if that was even a possibility. If you take trees down, that, you can make that decision, but that's not a good decision either. It will be a decision that will be criticized, and there's a lot of memorial trees along there. So I just really don't know if there's even the width to put in a sidewalk there on the west side.
Can I do my
Thanks.
last?
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Poulos.
Yeah, sorry, I just, one little thing that might help the conversation further is, do we not have like the trail and recreation plan review coming up?
Yes.
Could
Yeah.
this be worked into that to help with cost and considerations? I'm just thinking if we're already doing it, why isn't this part of it? In regards to looking at the along the water
Sure.
side.
So it would be, that review would be for trails.
Mhm.
So that's for trails. Like
Yeah.
in this case, it wouldn't be a review of the sidewalks.
But if it was an alternative approach to take, could that be included in the review?
Yeah, so right now, the trail is accessible.
Yeah.
The issue is we do not maintain any of our trails in the wintertime.
Right.
So that section is not maintained in the winter.
Okay. I'm just thinking if we did look at the other side of the road and if there was a portion that we decided to make accessible year round. I'm just thinking because that review is coming up, if there's other possibilities to look at it in like short little pieces.
Yeah, if council wants to think about how it maintains trails in a different way, that could be considered as part of that review.
Like, I'll just put it out here. I'm just thinking like if you went across the road with the crosswalk there to that little portion that just went all the way down to King Street and then another crosswalk that went back over, that section of trail being maintained as a year-round piece of trail. Like, I feel like there's going to be lots more of considerations there because of some of the water and stuff.
Yeah, we would need to think about that. So if you're going to maintain it like a sidewalk, you'd have to construct it as a sidewalk, and we might need to look at, like a railing or something next to the river.
Okay. But would that fall under the trails review? Just for our own understanding?
It could potentially.
Okay. I'm just thinking of alternatives to save money and time and because the stuff's already happening, why not, right? So, thank you.
All right, we have this motion on the floor.
Sorry, through your, Mayor again. You know, I get there's issues with trees and so on along there. We can replace trees. Because the options on the other side of the road are much more considerable, as far as costs. And I know some of them are memorials and so on, but I think we can manage that. Again, maybe that's the option is to look at it through the trail, review, the recreation and trail review as an option for opening up a portion of the trail there to year round and how we might be able to do that.
Yeah.
I could certainly support that as an amendment to.
No, I don't, you know, there's a motion on the floor now.
Okay.
And if you want to bring another motion
No, I'd have to
forward
make a friendly amendment to his motion if he wants to change it, right?
to what?
To saying that it will be reviewed with the recreation. and-
The motion that he has right now is dealing with the sidewalk. And so I think it would be better if we deal with that. And then if you want to bring a motion forward to talk about trails or what we go do with trails, when we deal with the recreation plan, that's another story. But it's an apple and an orange, Ron.
Okay.
So if we can deal with the motion that's on the floor right now, and I've asked for a recorded vote, please, clerk.
Yes, thank you. Counselor Henry? So, sorry, just to be clear, this would be considering John's motion that would essentially, just to get the broad strokes here.
Here, I can read it out if you like.
Just, yeah, even the final part.
Council asks staff to engage the appropriate professionals to provide a plan and estimated cost to complete the sidewalk on Water Street between Reed and King Streets.
Counselor Henry.
I'll vote against.
So no,
Just a no.
No.
thank you. Mayor Sennis,
No.
Deputy Mayor Black,
I'm gonna say no, that just includes the east side.
okay,
It's a no there. Yeah.
okay. Counselor Boyko
Yes.
and Counselor Kulis.
Yes.
Why am I the last
Sorry.
one?
I'm sorry, Counselor Kulis.
I'm gonna say yes, actually.
Okay, motion is lost.
I would like to move the motion to include a review of the accessibility and walkability of the future use of the trail as a year-round during the recreation services review.
Favor? Right, let's move on to the other part of the original.
Yeah. Okay. The other part of it, I think we're going for a record. This may be our longest meeting and it's my fault. I apologize.
We're
Okay.
good until 4.
Okay, the second part of the report, which again, I think is a tremendous amount of work that Angie and Adam and others have done. It talks about the sidewalk policy and says that we do not have a sidewalk policy. And I believe that we should. I understand everything that the report says. And the report says, it states that multi-use paths and sidewalks are installed within a road allowance and in the township case are considered in our urban and planning areas. In other words, sidewalks are among the options to be considered. I don't believe that goes far enough. I believe that we need a sidewalk policy that establishes sidewalks not as something that should be considered, but something that is the established standard for all streets in urban areas and newly constructed within a plan of subdivision, or as the report says, new, expanded, replaced, or reconstructed infrastructure. So it should be not a consideration, but the standard. If you're going to build a subdivision, there will be sidewalks. If we're going to rebuild a road, there should be sidewalks now. This established standard should be consistent with the report, noting that the plan of subdivision include pedestrian infrastructure. It would be consistent with the county's road profiles for urban applications and with the stated considerations as to whether a sidewalk is feasible under certain circumstances. After all, there are some times where a sidewalk is simply not possible, or it would not simply be right in a certain circumstance. And we can all think of those things. So I won't go through all the whereas, but I would like to move a motion then that says that staff write and present to council a Selwyn Township sidewalk policy that clearly establishes sidewalks as the standard for all streets in urban areas that are newly constructed within a planned subdivision, or new, expanded, replaced, or reconstructed infrastructure within a developed area. And this is the policy established documentation related to pedestrian infrastructure reviews that includes a checklist of considerations that may result in a recommendation to council that a sidewalk in a particular circumstance may not be feasible or recommended. So if I just comment on that, what it is saying is that sidewalks become the norm. You're going to build a subdivision, you're going to reconstruct a road, there will be a sidewalk. But the second part of that policy document that we're asking staff to provide says that there is a checklist of considerations that may result in a recommendation to council that a sidewalk in a particular circumstances may not be feasible or recommended.
A very long. It's a motion.
Yeah.
And you're reading it to it again. We haven't had the opportunity to view it and absorb it. If you get a seconder, I would like to be able to defer it so I can see it. I don't feel comfortable passing anything that's that lengthy.
Okay, would you prefer then, and would it be council's wish that I put this as a motion, notice of motion for our next council meeting, since we have already accepted this report?
We accepted the report to do with the sidewalk on Water Street. Help me here, Clark.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, you did receive, essentially you received the information. So that's been taken care of. If you do wish to make the notice of motion and bring it forward to the next meeting, that's fine. You can provide that to us and we could put it on new business as a notice of motion. You can deal with it then.
Yeah,
Great.
I feel more comfortable.
That is fine with me.
Deputy Mayor Black.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Senes. Yeah, I think the motions.
Oh, sorry. Can you just turn your mic on? Sorry.
It is on. Red
Just a
light.
general reminder to council to be turning on their mics.
Yeah, the
There's
red
a
light's on.
couple that have mentioned.
Yeah, maybe it's not working or the red light is on.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, you're good, Ron.
Okay, thank you. No, I think Councilor Borkos is on to something. I think it is important, as I talked about earlier, the walkability of neighborhoods is such an important thing. I'd like to also add on to it. You've talked more about urban areas, but let's talk about more rural areas, subdivisions that, again, as I spoke to earlier, need to make sure that the road surface is wide enough, that it can be plowed wide enough into the ditch where people have space to walk as well. Whether that's through adding a paved area to it or creating a separate paved multi-use that's got something in between. But again, something that's low maintenance, obviously, because we can't run our sidewalk machines out to subdivisions too. So it would have to be something that would be plowed by the road crew. But I think that's an important feature as well, that any little subdivision should have a walking surface included in the road surface.
A subdivision should, anyway, we'll deal with that when the motion comes back to our next meeting. So you put a notice of motion forward, Councillor Boyko? All right,
Sorry, I will, and I'll have it for our next meeting.
thank you.
Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you. Yeah, so I think council will probably recall that Peterborough Public Health gave us notice last fall that as of November 24th, 2024, they would no longer be taking on the responsibilities under the Ontario Building Code Part 8, which is that of managing the sewage systems program. PPH staff have been working diligently on coming up with a transition plan for these services, as this means that that authority and that responsibility will transfer to the local municipalities. We've had a couple of meetings with PPH, which have been great, and I really think they're putting together a really good plan to manage the transition. Components of that transition plan look at the types of information and data that they can provide to us so that we can assess our readiness and what resources we need to be able to be responsible for the work and complete the work. They're looking at communication plans for the industry and for the public, looking at provision of training opportunities for our staff and allowing staff to shadow alongside them until the end of their responsibility, just as a learning opportunity. Certainly, they're preparing a lot of documentation, policies, procedures, forms, applications that they will then transfer to us so that we can take advantage of those templates. And also they're digitizing the files and will be transferring files to the municipality. So I think they've covered off the major components that need to be dealt with as part of the transition and are working hard to make that work. As part of their work, they have offered 2 transition dates that the municipalities can choose from. Option 1 is a transfer date as of November 17th, 2024, just before the agreement comes to an end. And that would see local municipalities taking on any new submissions and any open applications that they have as of November 18th, 2024. And then PPH would, for the rest of the year until the end of 2024, continue to work through trying to clean up some of those open files and get them closed and things like that. Option 2 is for the local municipality to assume all new applications beginning April 1st, 2024. This definitely would allow for a softer transition. And between April 1st, excuse me, and November 17th, I'm losing my voice, PPH would be putting those efforts into trying to finish up and clean up all those open files. And that would really eliminate a lot of open files being transferred from PPH to the township. Will be a lot easier for the folks who are on the receiving end of the permits because they deal with one organization through their permit, hopefully, and not have to be transferred in between. There may be a few files that would be remaining, but I think it would really minimize that issue. So we are recommending that we would go with option 2. We would go with the April 1st transition date. For those reasons, I think it will make it more seamless and less confusing for the public. And it also gives us a good length of time when PPH will still be in the business, as we're working through our processes and if we need support along the way. Certainly, I think we're confident that we would be in position to provide that service as of April 1st. We do anticipate that we will need some additional resources to manage this program. We are a big part of the work that PPH does across the county at this point in time, and more information will come to you on that when we bring forward our departmental review in a few weeks. Currently, Robert is qualified to manage those services. We would proceed to have our deputy CBO qualified right away as well, and then we would look at qualifying additional staff in future 2024, 2025 as well. Certainly, this line of business is very similar to our building permit process. So the fees are set to ensure that we are covering the cost of the service delivery. There won't be a tax component to this service. So it would all be covered by the fees that are collected. And again, further information would come to you in terms of, okay, what's the right level to set those fees? That would come to you as part of our budget discussions.
6C. Please. I would just like a bit more of an update on this. What is the proposed process of going back and reviewing? Like, what is the time frame for that? I know there's dates put in, but are there stages within those dates that we should be considering?
Yeah, so when we have our capital budget meeting next week, we will include a provision to have some additional engineering and design costs for this rescoped work. So we need to go back to the table and kind of look at the project in again. Figure out what are the key things that we really want to keep in that project. So the whole goal really of this project that started was CIP improvement. So landscaping, street lighting, those types of things, and a sidewalk. So I think we would start from there. Those are the things that we really want to include in the project. Are there other things that are part of that project that got built in that we could, kind of eliminate and reduce our costs? So that would be the first thing we would do with the engineer in 2024, providing that council gives approval for us to include that in the capital budget. So we do that work in 2024. That would mean redesigning it, updating our cost estimates, starting a new tender package, putting it out to tender, and then we would then consider, as part of the 2025 budget, kind of this time next year, including it for construction in 2025.
Okay, one follow-up question. Can you clarify where council comes back into that? I recognize there's the budget and then bringing back the designs with tender. Is there anything else in between that? Like, would there be public consultations we could help attend with, or?
Yeah, so we're going to have to kind of think about that, because we did do public consultation on this, and which informed the design. We're going to update the design. So we'll probably want to go back and do a little bit of a check-in with the community through a PIC or in some manner. We do have some good contact information for people that we connected with, get their feedback on it, and then council can be involved certainly in that process too.
Okay, thank you.
If I can ask one question through you, Mayor Sanders, I was really disappointed that to see the prices that came back from Drain Young's and Dufferin, that is now going to slow this, because I was a big proponent of the plan. Could you, for me, and probably maybe for others, just review briefly? Tell me what the project was all about. What were some of the elements that were in the project, and so that we can know now what the project was and have a better sense of what it may look like as we're going forward.
Yeah, sure thing. So we basically looked at the intersection at Ennis and Tara, and we looked at if we were on Tara, kind of going down to about the fire hall, and then coming north just past Sullivan. So that was kind of the extent on Tara. Then on Ennis, we looked at the area between Earl and then just essentially past Sullivan's store. So that's kind of the scope of the area. So we looked at a complete road reconstruction, stormwater, sidewalks, and then all of the nice stuff that you incorporate into the CIP. So some of the things that were included in there and some of the price variables were, we wanted to mimic those Celtic dry stack walls that were implemented by the Ennismore Horse Society in a couple of locations. We had prices all over the place on that. We had some Celtic decorative railings that were required on the, I'm so bad with corners, I think it would be the north west side, thank you, Lane. Because there's a bit of a dip there, we would have to have some kind of guardrail barricades. We looked at a nice decorative railing there. Again, some of the cost estimates were a little bit all over the place. So we're thinking that we can do a couple of different things. If we reduce the overall road construction, and not have it, maybe it's not an asphalt top of the line surface. Maybe we look at not putting curb and gutter in some spots, because that adds to the cost. The other thing, Lane had a great idea, is try to pre-qualify some of the subs on the project that do some of those specialized pieces, like the Celtic dry stack wall, some of the decorative features. We could do some of that work in advance, and then the contractors aren't going out and asking this person and getting 50 different kinds of prices that just were all over the place.
Yeah.
Granular material was high. Asphalt prices were high. Everything was just high.
If I could follow, yeah, I remember when we saw we were on our tour, and when in the fire station, that's when we saw the drawings, and very, very impressive. I was really looking forward to this project going forward. So I think you partly answered the question, but the part of the project that really pushed it so far above where we thought it was going to be $400,000 was essentially the road work, not the decorative.
I think it was everything.
Oh, it was everything.
Yeah,
not
it was
not one element.
No,
that
I
pushed it out.
wouldn't say it was just one element. Just
Okay.
all the cost estimates. The engineering firm provides cost estimates. They use projects that they've worked on before to come up with unit prices. Just overall, they were all way higher than the estimates, like just way higher. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
One of the people you might check with is Woody to do with the decorative. Yeah. Councillor Coles.
Just a follow-up question here. If we are going to do piecemeal and we do the decorative stuff before, can we, to some extent, involve the horticultural Ennismore Garden Club, given that they have worked in this area and they do fundraising around it? Like, is there a partnership that can happen for cost sharing?
We could have that conversation with them. I know that when they discuss the project, they're not looking for more projects,
Okay.
but maybe we could have conversation with them. They might have access to some resources that we could take advantage of. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Ron, 6A1.
6A1, yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor Senes, just reporting on the budget considerations for Town of Regional Conservation Authority. I'll speak to it, and then Councillor Boyk, who's also on the board, can add to it if he likes. So the increase through our budget process is 3.2% for the Orca budget this year, which I think is very reasonable considering inflation and everything else we've had to deal with through COVID at Orca, which equates to a $44,000, almost $45,000 increase in their budget in pure dollars. The capital funds required for next year are $105,000. There's about 6 different projects that they're going to be doing. That's going to be taken rather than billed back to the municipalities. It's going to be taken from the 2023 budget surplus. So there won't be any additional requirements at the municipal level for supporting capital projects next year. So the total to Selwyn Township last year, we were in at about $241,000. This year we'll be in at $249,000. So it's about a $7,500 increase year over year, which I think is fairly reasonable for such a large organization. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Okay, so I need someone to move those two items that have been pulled. Councillor Henry, Councillor Koulis, all in favor. That's carried. Thank you. Roma delegation requests. Councillor Henry.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Senes. I'd like to request delegation regarding STRs, and it would be with municipal affairs and housing.
Thank you. Something that I think would be important too, again, is to deal with the link extension with the Ministry of Transportation. And I'm on the library board, and council is going to be receiving a request for increase this year. And I'd like to go before Tourism, Culture and Sport to request an increase in the base library services operating grant. It's been the same since 2001. And of course, costs have gone up, and I think it's time that we go with cap in hand and demand more money. Is there anyone else? Councillor Colas.
Kind of two questions here. We have the accessibility meeting this week. We can still receive information for potential delegations to bring back. Like the date is November 20th, so it's gonna be before our next meeting, but we can submit that in the office here if we have something from the accessibility committee.
Typically, we would get council to endorse
Okay.
so if there's something, were you thinking?
No, I just didn't know, just because we didn't have our last meeting, so we didn't
Right.
chat about it.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
I don't think there's anything, but I just dotting i's, crossing t's.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. And then the second one was with short-term rentals, because short-term rentals fall into the circular economy. Would that not also fall outside of housing? I think it's environment, maybe.
We asked the RMPP, and they said Ministry of Housing.
Okay,
That's what
I'm
we're-
just wondering if we could hit
Yeah.
two ministries with the same presentation. But I'll leave it there.
All right, and we, let's deal with the bylaws before we go into closed.
so-
Angie, if you can please.
Oh,
read-
sorry. Oh, I think you just needed to vote on the final.
Oh, on the Roma
Yes.
thing? Okay, I need a mover, Councillor Boyko, Deputy Mayor Black, all in favor, that's carried, thank you.
And I did have one other item to add to new business, sorry.
Okay,
So we just wanted approval to add one item to the capital budget discussion next week. So an opportunity has come forward to consider the purchase of a compactor, a used compactor. So Adam will have a report. We just would like the approval from council to add that to the special agenda for next week.
okay, Councillor Koulis, Councillor Henry, all in favor, that's carried. Now to the bylaws.
Thank you. Sorry. Okay, so we have bylaw 77. This is the authorizing agreement for CMO for our Blue Box Depot. 78 is a merger agreement with respect to a consent application. 79, again, another merger agreement with respect to a consent application. 80 is to amend our Lakefield traffic bylaw to add stop signs on Water Street. And then 81 is to authorize the transfer of township land, 108 Bridge Street to Glen Bug.
Okay, so I need someone to move that. Deputy Mayor Black, Councillor Henry, all in favor, that's carried, thank you. I need a motion to go into close. Councillor Henry, Councillor Boyko, all in favor, that's carried. We'll meet in the other room. Oh, yeah, we'll do like a 3-minute file, but